As you're thinking about selling your apartment building, there are 5 key considerations that you should keep in mind. So watch this video to help make a smart decision. First of all, if you're considering selling your building, you should very carefully evaluate a couple key criteria before you make that decision. And the first one is, if you're tired of managing your property, if you're doing that yourself, is there a better alternative? So for a lot of owners, it may be the case that you should go out and hire a property manager, and that'll help take the burden off of you. But for a lot of owners, letting go of control of a property that they've managed for a long time is really hard. And it is also difficult to find a quality property manager. So what you should do is look at the difference in your net operating income by 15%. And the reason I say 15% is because even though property managers may charge somewhere between 5 and 10% for their management, usually there's going to be a higher vacancy and turnover cost when you have a property manager in place. Because let's face it, nobody's going to manage the building quite like you are. So you need to account for those higher turnover expenses. And that's why I would say use 15% as your ratio when evaluating the cost of hiring a property manager and if that's worthwhile to you. If it is, great, maybe you should take that route. But if it's not, then let's go to step 2. So step 2 is to consider the equity that you have in the property. And oftentimes what happens is, if owners have owned this property for a long time, they say, well, it cash flows great because, they have no mortgage. Well, of course it cash flows great. But what they need to do is look at, is that money being put to good use? So let's say that they bought the property for $2 million, but it's now worth $5 million. Is that $5 million of equity that's sitting there, is that actually giving you a good return? So if it's not giving you an actually quality cash on cash return for the value of that $5 million equity, you as the owner need to look at it not as your $2 million purchase, but your $5 million purchase. Because if you sell and you take that $5 million and put it to use in another investment, is it going to get you a better return? And that is the criteria that you want to look at. The third thing you want to look at is your depreciation. So again, so many owners, they will use up their depreciation schedule because they've owned for so long. So in multifamily, that's 27.5 years. And if they've owned longer than that, they've used up all that benefit and are now paying full taxes on all of that return. But what they could do is sell, or just do a 1031 exchange, exchange into a larger asset that will give them more depreciation. And you could even use bonus depreciation in order to juice that return on the front end and get more depreciation if you wanted to. So if you've used up the depreciation, then yes, that is something that you really need to consider. Maybe you should sell your property and upgrade to another one that's going to give you a depreciation loss to help counteract that income. The fourth thing you want to look at is how you can avoid capital gains. So if you've owned the property for a while, you're going to have a pretty substantial capital gain. Even if it hasn't been that long, so many owners who bought in the last 5 years have a huge amount of equity because real estate prices appreciated so much in those 5 years. So if you're going to be looking at a large capital gain, you need to consider how you're going to offset that. So for a lot of people, that could be a 1031 exchange. And keep in mind that a 1031 exchange does not mean you got to sell an apartment building and buy an apartment building. You can sell an apartment building and buy a ground lease triple net investment that has no management expenses. It just needs to be real estate for real estate. So if you can do an exchange and defer those capital gains and depreciation recapture, that could be an excellent thing. Or maybe you can kick that can down the road and do seller finance if you don't want to purchase more real estate. That can be an excellent way to delay and decrease capital gains as well if you consider seller financing. So don't rule that out. That's an excellent tool for a seller to decrease those capital gains. And then the fifth thing you want to think about is that, do you really want truly passive income, or are you just looking to have a return that you don't have to worry about? So what I mean by that is if you have a real estate asset, it's going to take some type of management, but there are real estate investments that qualify for a 1031, like a DST or a tenants in common, aka a TIC, that are essentially just like buying a stock. There's no management involved. And yes, the return might be a little bit less than an actively owned apartment building, but you're doing nothing. And so the cost of your time, so to speak, in the asset is also a consideration that you should take in when you're evaluating whether you want to sell your building or keep it over the long term. So I hope those 5 things brought you some value and some things to think about if you're considering a sale. If so, please like, comment, and share. And if you're looking for investments, selling or buying within Pennsylvania or Maryland, please reach out to us. We're happy to help.